everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I am starting my October reading wrap-up today. The first finish I had in October was this novella, With or Without Angels by Douglas Bruton. Okay, so I am an artist, in case you don't know, and so I'm really drawn to fiction and nonfiction, but a lot of fiction as well, around artists and art and just books with that subject matter. So when I heard Sean from Sean Breathes Books talking about this one, I thought, oh yeah, I should definitely check it out. So this is a really interesting premise of how this book came to be. This author met an artist's widow, and she told him about his work, and the author went and watched video about this author's work and was inspired to write this novella. And he wrote it within a week, and sent it to the widow, and then the widow was enthralled and was so happy that he'd written this about her husband's work. And so she gave him permission to use the artworks themselves in the story. And so he wrote a fictional story about how these pieces may have come to be. And I think that's a really interesting premise, but I'm not exactly sure that this was a completely successful story for me. And the reason that I found it difficult was because it was told in vignettes, and I feel like the vignettes should have been more connected, because I ended up not feeling super connected to the characters, and I ended up feeling like the artistic process, which was, he tried to kind of explain the artistic process here, wasn't really ended up being quite disjointed. And I think that was because of the artist character in here being an older person and suffering from memory problems and also suffering with health problems. And so everything just remained kind of removed and a bit disjointed. And the subject matter and how it all connected and all these different parts that I think would have been nice to connect just didn't. We have a character named Livy, who is a young female artist who comes and helps the older artist with his work. She kind of uses Photoshop to create the photographs that he's trying to do, because he can't paint anymore. So he's basically painting with photographic material and using, Photoshop or some sort of photo software to manipulate the images into being like a painting for him. He's inspired by this fresco by the Italian artist Giandomenico Tiepolo. And there's this kind of connection between the wife and this young woman, and this kind of confusion that the artist will feel because he feels his wife's younger energy with this young woman. And I felt that was a little strange. I think having been in a long-term relationship, you don't crave the kind of younger version of someone the way he described here, or at least I don't experience that myself. And there were just things that didn't ring true for me personally. So while I think that this idea was very interesting, and the idea of each chapter being a certain photograph, there were 11 photographs in total, and each chapter talks about a photograph and is named after that photograph. I think there were a lot of interesting things about this, but it just didn't end up hitting home for me or being a book that I loved or would recommend personally. I think as an exercise in creativity, it was interesting, but as a, in the reality of like what this is, it just didn't resonate completely with me. So that is With or Without Angels by Douglas Bruton, and I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey y'all, my second finish of October was Follow Me to Africa by Penny Ha. I made a whole reading vlog about this book. It was my fresh read for October. But in case you're not into reading vlogs, I'll just let you know what it's about. So this is a dual perspective novel. We're following Grace, who is a young 17-year-old whose mother has passed away. She's estranged from her father, and she and her father go on this trip. He is an archaeologist, and they go to Tanzania, to the Serengeti, and join Mary Leakey's archaeological dig in the Ondai. Let me look that up so that I say it properly. Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. So this is a real life place that Mary Leakey lived in for years and excavated for years. Grace, this part of the timeline is set in 1983. And Grace meets Mary Leakey and they form a bond, and she learns a lot about her life, about coming of age, about what she wants to be, and it's quite a transformational experience for Grace. The other perspective is Mary Leakey's. We pick up her life from I believe we do get some childhood, but a lot of it is her coming of age as well, when she was around Grace's age, up until adulthood, where she marries Louis Leakey and pursues her anthropology and archaeology studies, which she does not do conventionally. She doesn't go to university. She learns on the job from other intelligent people and becomes a very, very successful person. So I'd say that's one of the themes in here, is this kind of championing of different paths, that you don't have to do things conventionally in order to have a successful life. And then Mary Leakey's life is followed in here. The author does say that she doesn't invent any events that happened in Mary Leakey's life. All the events are true events that happened. She might change the timeline slightly just to work better with the story. Grace, of course, is a fictional character, and I thought overall it was entertaining. I did find it started to drag a little bit near the end, and yeah, I mean, I go into more details about the things that I feel that could have been done better in the novel in the vlog. So if you're interested in learning more about it, then I would say head on over there. As I said, this is a fresh read. This is a 2025 release, and Penny Ha is a South African author. So yeah, it's historical fiction. If you enjoy historical fiction about real life people, then I would say check this out. And I think Mary Leakey is a fascinating individual. And I think Penny Ha definitely chose a worthy, exceptional woman to write this novel about. Okay, I'll check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey everyone, so I finished The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, and this book chronicles 5 different important events in the history of Palestine, Israel, from 1917 to 2017. I listened to this on audio, and I really thought it was an excellent book. The method of dividing up certain events and telling the history that way was, I think, a really helpful method, because it kept things a little bit more succinct than it would have been if Khalidi was trying to put everything into this one book. And so just following these 5 events and understanding those 5 events in relation to obviously what's been going on for the last 3 years 2 years was really helpful for me. And it really helped me to see a pattern. It really helped me to understand this, this building, this snowball of Israel, the government of Israel, and then the settlers of Israel, and how that settler colonial mindset has expanded and built, having its origins in a Zionist mindset that was supported by the British, and then supported by the Americans, and supported by other countries in general. This kind of lack of unity in other Arab nations to kind of solidify anything to help Palestinians, gain some sort of general consensus around their identity, this kind of fluidness that, is also a symptom of colonial settler mentality, that you come into a place and you say, well, your culture is not valid. Your culture, you don't own this land. You don't belong to this land. You're nomadic, or you're fluid, and therefore you don't fit our definition of who owns land. And so we're going to use that to justify removing you from the land. So, there's a lot of layers to this situation. And I think it's super important to understand both the, continuous and deserved Palestinian desire and need for a solid identity and a right to place, and the inevitable repercussions of a Zionist mindset on a group of people who have been traditionally displaced for most of their religion, and therefore are clinging to something to be theirs, despite the fact that it's not really theirs. So anyway, I know that this is a very volatile topic. It has quieted down, of course, in the last few weeks since I finished this book, because of the ceasefire. But I think if you're paying attention to the news, or to some news sources, you'll know that there isn't really a ceasefire. Again, this is an ongoing issue. I am not sure. I want it to be resolved in a way that means that Palestinians can have an identity and safety and a place that is theirs. To belong. And this book is a very good book if you would like to educate yourself on this situation. All right, I'll check in again with you when I've finished another book. Hey everyone. So this morning I finished Cross Stitch by Jazmina Barrera, and it's translated from the Spanish by Christina MacSweeney. So I heard about this book on Brian from Bookish's channel a few years ago now, and the way he described it made me think I'd really like it, and I was right. He definitely described a book that is something that really appealed to me on many, many levels. So this book is set in Mexico, and it follows three women. Really, they're young women as they're coming of age. So they're in high school and then in their early 20s for the most part of the story. And then you kind of fast forward, I would say, probably a decade post high school. And we encounter two of the women, Mira and Dalia, as they are dealing with the death of Kitlali, who is, and hopefully I'm saying her name right, I'm not sure if it's Sitlali or Kitlali, who was the third friend in their friend group. So the story is told vignette style with these needle and thread separating them. And so you have present day Mira is our narrator in present day. You have, actually, I think Mira is the narrator the whole time, and Mira is also a writer. And so she is interspersing snippets, which I think are actually snippets of the book that she wrote about embroidery. So the connection that these three women have is through their hobby, their handicraft, which is embroidery. They all do it together. They all learn different stitches. And obviously there's a long and very rich history of embroidery in Mexico and in South America as well. So it's not just the Mexican tradition that is talked about here, but traditions from many different cultures, and they study that together and they find it really interesting and they work on it together, and it's something that they bond over and that is really pivotal to their relationship. They also at points write novels together, they travel together. A lot of the book takes place in London and Paris as well, on trips that they took between high school and university. This also focuses on their relationships, their sexuality, their home lives, and their relationship. It's a book about the relationship between these three women, how important it was for them, and how difficult it is to have to deal with the death of one of your best friends. What else happens in the book? I mean, there's not a lot of plot in this book. It's a lot of the little vignettes are little snippets of things about embroidery, embroidery showing up in novels, embroidery showing up in other artists' work. And there's also, I would say, a very strong theme in here of women's empowerment, women's sexual harassment by men. And also there are some, I wouldn't say anything in here is very graphic, but there is depictions of sexual assault as well. So, it's very much focusing on an important thing for young women coming of age. I believe these women were probably millennial age. So they dealt with a lot of things as they were growing up. It's a really well put together coming of age novel, I would say. And it has, great descriptions of art and travel and the hard things that a lot of young women go through, and this kind of bond that is able to help you get through them when you have friendship. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this. If you like any of those things that I've described, I think you'll like this book. And I'm really grateful for Brian for talking about it and recommending it. And I think I would definitely read more of Jazmina Barrera's work. I've had in the past, I think this is actually in my limited, and by limited I mean like less than 5, I would say, but around 4 to 5 novels that I have read written by Mexican or South American female authors. There's definitely an interesting connection I see between the style of this generation's writing, where it is very vignette style and how they do it, and the other authors that I have read. Most of them I read for when I was judging the Booktube Prize for the translation prize. They wrote in a similar style with the vignettes, and I didn't find it as successful as this novel. So I think something about Jazmina Barrera's, or maybe it's Christina Sweeney's translation, I'm not sure, but something about the way she writes in this style works really well for me in a way that the other authors that I have read who use this style has not been as successful. So that was really positive. Okay, I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hi everyone. I'm going to wrap up my October reading with you today. So I finished off the month with the novel Behold the Many by Lois and Yamanaka. I bought this book when I was in Hawaii 2 years ago, and it was great to be able to find a local author of color, and I wanted to read this at this time of year because it's a ghost story. So I have very mixed feelings about this novel. I'm going to try to be succinct about them here. We open the story, I believe we're on the island of Oahu, but it's not specifically said, I don't think. And all of the islands are kind of mentioned at different points in the story. But we open up the story in, I believe it's 1913. So this is, in a lot of ways, oh, sorry, that's 1913. It goes from 1913 to 1939, set completely in Hawaii. And we're following immigrant populations that were brought or came to Hawaii in order to work on sugar plantations and different things like that. So the Japanese community, the Portuguese community mostly, and then a little bit of the Chinese community. I believe there are some Native Hawaiians woven in, but I don't think that's really talked about a lot. There are just a lot of Hawaiian names used. This novel also has a lot of pidgin in it. So when you are encountering different, there's also Korean characters. When you're encountering different people, different characters, they will all speak differently in different dialects of pidgin based on, the culture that they've come from. Our main character is named Susana Medeiros. She is half Portuguese, half Japanese. And it is implied that her father, who is rather a brute and abusive in many ways, acquired his mother through a matchmaker and acquired Susana's mother, married his wife in a kind of, tricked situation. Like, she was not, maybe she was a courtesan, she was direct from Japan, brought here to be the wife, and I don't know. It's a lot of the relationships in this book are very, very complex and layered, and they are also very abusive, and they're also very sad. This book is very bleak. It is I would say it could trigger many different things, and a lot of the abuse and bleakness in the book is not really addressed in any way that would feel, that would give you any sort of resolution around this abuse. So please be forewarned before reading it that is the case. Susana and her sisters Aki and Leah are sent at different times to go live in an orphanage run by Catholic nuns because they all contract tuberculosis. So tuberculosis was obviously rampant in communities, especially communities of poverty, and the Medeiroses are very, very poor. They have very little money. They have very little access. And so they all go and live in this orphanage. In this orphanage, some of the sisters are kind, some of them are abusive. They do try, it seems, to rehabilitate the people who are staying with them, and a lot of them do go home when they're better, but a lot of them also die, and Aki and Leah die. And this is, pretty much shown. It's not a spoiler. It happens very early on. It's in the blurb. And so Susana survives, for better or worse, because her life is harsh, and all the children in this family's lives are harsh, except for Thomas, who's the oldest, who we really don't hear about. And there was a lot of things that were told in this story that weren't clear, that were a bit confusing. And I think that has something to do with the structure of the novel. We have dated chapters, and then we have these interspersed chapters that come specifically from different characters' perspectives. And some of those are, to me, were not necessary because they take you into, like, there's a lot of religion in this book, a lot of Catholic belief systems. There's a lot of ideas of cursing and superstition, a lot of the cultural superstitions and customs are talked about in here, which I found interesting. But ultimately, it made the book longer than it should have been. And it took you meanderingly through the story. And a lot of the characters that were given these kind of smaller chapters to show their perspectives, I just felt it was not interesting enough to include, and it diluted the main story too much. Susanna is ultimately haunted by Aki and Leah and a few other ghosts. And so I'm not sure if this book was supposed to be representing some sort of magical realism. I felt like it was too rooted in reality to really represent magical realism in a way that worked for me. And Susanna, Anna for short, she just endured so much, and everything was brought back to her sisters being mad at her because she lied to them when they were dying. And I just thought that's not a good enough reason for all of the hardship that she's going through. And even when she had little bits of love, like, a lot of the things didn't make sense. There's a whole section about her giving birth to her daughters, and she gives birth to like 4 daughters or 5 daughters. And each time it's horrifically terrible labor in which she, is immediately having sex again with her husband and then getting pregnant instantly, which isn't even technically possible. And that part actually made me put the book down in frustration. I just felt a lot of frustration with how the author chose to tell this story, and how there are some beautiful passages. There's some beautiful nature writing. Anna's relationship with the bees is really quite stunning. But again, it's like there's so much abuse. Like Susanna's husband's family are very negative towards Anna. They use a lot of racial slurs. There's a lot of racial slurs. There's a lot of racism, prejudice in the book. It's very heavy-handed. And I just don't know if it was necessary. I feel like there's a lot of beauty in here that could have made this book sing. And it just didn't sing for me. It was really difficult to get through. And I wanted to kind of read it because it was a ghost story and it was around Halloween, and the ghostliness of it, they're very present. They're very angry ghosts, and things are resolved in that area, but it felt like too little too late in a lot of ways for me with this novel. So overall, I can't say that I would recommend this book. I think it has a lot of merit in terms of the cultures it's representing in Hawaii, the time period it's representing, the poor and downtrodden are represented here, which is of course important to have in books. But again, I just really struggle to get through it. I struggle when authors decide to put such a slog onto the reader and expect the reader to get just some tiny little nuggets of beauty or levity, and then it's back into the slog. And it's just really hard as a character reader to do that, because you just want some resolution for this person. And I also found the writing style just confusing at times. There's times when I thought a character had just died, and then I read in the next chapter that they're alive, and then I didn't understand how that was conveyed. So there was a little bit of a problem with that as well. So I don't think I will seek out any more Lois and Yamanaka books. I think apparently this one's actually quite different from her other novels and her other writings, but I'm not really interested in pursuing any more of her work. But yeah, that's Behold the Many. Wish I would have liked it more. And that is the end of this reading wrap up. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will be back again soon with I'm going to have 2 more reading wrap ups for this year, November and December. So thanks again for watching.